everyone. Hello, hello. I think we're going to get started soon. Okay. Where's Robert?
Yeah, you too. Handsome. It's like the first thing was dirty liquor. So I'm waiting till 25 when the music
Should I go? Okay, so if you can please grab a seat, we'll begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hey. I am so honored to, we're so honored to host this event with other countries. Thank you so much for choosing the Poetry Project to host this solstice reading. I know this, you guys have been doing this for more than 40 years, which is truly admirable. And it's so beautiful to have this community here tonight. So welcome to the Poetry Project. My name is Mira Narsanios. I'm the program director here. I usually announce our upcoming events, but this is our last event of the season. And what a beautiful note to end on. And our first event of 2025 will be our end of year marathon. And if you've never been to a marathon before, please join us. We're gonna have more than 120 performers. 2 of them are here tonight. Pamela Sneed and John Keane will be reading and performing. So it's gonna be riotous, joyous, outrageous, so please join us. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I wanna apologize for the cold. I see some of you are shivering. I'm so sorry. This is something beyond our control. We've been having like heat issues in the building, but hopefully it will be fixed by January 1st. So before I pass it on, I just want to, logistics, there are 2 all-gender bathrooms, one on the first floor, and 1 accessible bathroom on the ground floor. So if you need to access the bathroom, please let me know and I'll get you there. Okay, and I'll turn it over to Len to introduce the evening. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Other Countries' Winter Solstice event. My name is Len Richardson, and it is my pleasure to be your host for this event tonight. Just a little housekeeping. Please be aware that there is a sign-up sheet over at the door on the desk if you would like to participate in the open mic. Also, on the same table, there is a QR code to our Facebook page. And if you are interested, you can find more information about us by going to Facebook, where everything is there. First, I'd like to thank Poetry Project for graciously hosting us this year for our Winter Solstice event. History. Winter solstice. Why solstice? Well, some 3 or 4 decades ago, one of our members, our late brother, Redra Jean-Marie, was at a meeting in the winter time, close to where we are now, and he thought, you know, we ought to have an event because what we do in our writing and our creativity is trying to bring some light into the world on the darkest day of the year. The winter solstice is the shortest day in the year. And from that inspiration, we pulled together a winter solstice that year. And then we said in the next year, well, maybe we should do something for the summer solstice, which is in June. And our history has been, we've tried many times to do a summer and winter solstice. And so that is why we are here tonight. Next, I'd like to let you know we have 3 featured readers that will entertain and provoke you. None other than John Keane, Pamela Sneed, and Danya Arlove. Speaking of the darkness that we have come together to try to confront, especially after our last election. I want to say that we have been here before, all of us, our community, our love, our patience, our creativity. And so we are still here and moving on, and we will continue. Tonight, I'd like to start us off with John Kane. John is the author, co-editor, and translator of a handful of books, including the forthcoming Love is a Dangerous Word, the selected poems of Essex Hemphill, co-edited with Robert F. Reedfar, Counter-Narratives, Stories and Novels, 2015, which received an American Book Award, a Lannan Literary Award, and a Wyndham Campbell Prize for Fiction, and Punk's New and Selected Poems, 2021, which received the 2022 National Book Award from the National Book Award for Poetry, the Tom Gunn Award from the Publishing Triangle, and a 2022 Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry. He has translated poetry and fiction by an array of authors, including Brazilian author Hilda Hills' Letters from a Seducer, which appeared in 2014, a 2018 MacArthur Fellow and member of the African Poetry Book Fund Editorial Board. He is Distinguished Professor and has served as Department Chair of Rutgers University. Please help me welcome John Kane.
Can you hear me? Oh, good. Okay. Thanks so much, Lynn. And many thanks to Robert Penn and other countries, to my fellow readers, Pamela Sneed, and is it Danya? Danya, our love, and the Poetry Project at St. Mark's Church. And I want to dedicate this reading to Roy Gonsalves and Colin Robinson, who I think were the first two other countries' writers I met. I'm actually going to read a little fiction, an excerpt from a novel. It is set in 1804, and it takes place in the darkness, but there is light. You heard it all? Sick? The man shook his head, this time with visible effort. Oh, I should say, the person, there are two people. One person's at his house, and the other person is a fugitive who arrives at his back door. The man shook his head, this time with more visible effort. I approached him again and touched the man's cheeks and throat, which were cool, not feverish. I grasped one of his wrists, which was bony yet solid with muscle, like the forearm extending from it. His pulse was rapid but not racing. Gathering the swaddled elbows in each hand, I lifted him from the stool to guide him into the main room and set him in the rocking chair. Once I'd done that, I remembered that I should close the shutters and curtains in case someone passing by peered in. The man's head rolled back onto the chair's back, and it was clear to me that his exhaustion was so great that he probably could not help from dozing. I knew I could let him sleep here, although there was no likelihood that anyone would drop by, especially at this hour, and I wasn't exactly sure what time it was, but it was certainly somewhere between twilight and dawn. I didn't want to chance it. You just rest here in this rocking chair while I get something ready for you. Just sit and I'll be right back. As I left him, I nearly tripped on my fiddle. Lifting it, I realized I ought to create more light, so I felt around the room until I found a tinderbox and a candle and got to work. First, I went to my bedroom and stripped the top blanket off the bed. I folded it in triangles like a flag until it fit under my arm. Then I grabbed an empty tin pail that I had long ago turned into a spittoon, an ash can until I gave up smoking in my bedroom, and a creamware bowl filled with coins, marbles, and other sundries that I emptied into one of my dresser drawers. From another drawer, I pulled out a nightshirt, which I sniffed to be sure it wasn't too musty, and rolled it into a ball. I tucked the bald nightshirt in the bowl and then the bowl into the pail and stuffed the blanket on top of it. I headed for the attic. I had not been up in it since the middle of the previous winter when I checked the underside of the roof for any water or snow damage and the roof beams for any signs of rot. The ladder I used to climb up there had not moved from its perch beneath the attic's trapdoor, so I made sure it was braced and scurried up, taking care not to drop the candle or let its flame touch anything. Entering the attic, I bumped my head on a cross beam, reminding me that the ceiling beams in places were low enough that I would have to be more careful and to stoop as I moved around. The man was short enough, however, that he could stand up here without much problem. The warm, stagnant air bore an aroma of wood that had been soaked in water, a listless dampness, though when I ran my hand across the beams and the floor, they were fairly dry to the touch. I unfurled an old rug that I'd stored away upright, first beating the dust out of it, then topping it with the quilt. I set the pail near the foot of the rug and the bald nightshirt at its head. A few steps back from this impromptu pallet and away from the trapdoor, I set down the bowl so that neither I nor the man would stumble over it. Then I descended the ladder and returned to the ground floor where the man, still bundled in the sheet, slept before the unlighted fireplace. He looked so comfortable that I felt bad about rousing him, but as soon as I touched his shoulder, his eyes opened, and after a little bit, he sat up. I told him where we were going and gestured for him to stand and was prepared to carry him if need be, but after a few minutes of trying to lift himself, he rose, and though staggering somewhat, as if he hadn't walked in a while, he took my hand and followed me upstairs to the second floor. When we had taken a few steps on the landing, the man crumpled to his knees. I didn't know if he had slipped on the sheet, which was trailing him like a train, or whether his legs had buckled and given out, so I crouched down and held the candle to his face. His eyes were half closed, as if he were in the throes of ecstasy or a dream. I cupped the back of his head and stroked his forehead for a little bit before saying anything. If he couldn't climb up into the attic, I would have to set up a makeshift bed either in my workroom or the cellar, and wondered for a second why I hadn't done so in the first place. Is your legs give out? You can't walk no more? I glanced at the workroom door, which was open. It would accommodate the man fine, at least for the time being. All I would need to do was clear out a space amidst the clutter that now filled it. The thought of this unknown man's access to all my knives, adzes, planes, saw, and the axe gave me a pause, and I reconsidered. If I could not get him to the attic, the cellar it would be. Freeing his hands from the blanket's folds, the man pushed himself up into a sitting position, then he stood. He was teetering a bit, and I began to lead him to the workroom, but the man's eyes opened wide. He looked toward the ceiling, resisting me as lightly as possible. I took hold of his shoulders and again tried to lead him to the workroom, but he raised his arm and pointed to the ladder and the trapdoor. He was determined to go up to the attic. I grasped his elbow through the fabric and walked him to the ladder's base. Can you climb it? I can put you on my back if you need me to. I wasn't really sure if I could carry him all the way up or if the ladder would bear us both, but I was willing to try. The man kicked the blanket's bottom away from his feet. He seized the rung with one hand and stood on another, pausing for a minute or so. Then he proceeded up the ladder without any hesitation, as if he had been climbing it his entire life. I hadn't imagined that he could move that quickly and was momentarily taken aback. I wondered again where he had come from and what he'd done before arriving here. Where had he lived or worked? On a farm, at a granary or mill, with a shipbuilder? That he learned to scale ladders so easily? And how many attics had he hidden in before this one? I followed the man up, and when we were both in the room, I found a ledge for the candle, then knelt down on the rug and pulled a quilt to the side. I beckoned the man to join me. The man again collapsed right onto the rug where he curled up on his side. I draped the sheet over him and atop that the blanket. I tucked the bald nightshirt under the man's head as a pillow and the blanket around the contours of his body. His eyes were again closed, and I figured he had fallen asleep as soon as he hit the rug's fabric. But I needed to tell him a few more things, so I shook his shoulder gently, and the eyes, like marbles rolled across a roughly plain floor, slowly settled into a gaze, meeting mine. This pail here, just where you relieve yourself. You understand? I tried to speak firmly and clearly. The man appeared to respond with his eyes, but I wasn't sure. You understand? This time, he lifted his head from the nightshirt pillow. I'm going to get you some water. So if you're thirsty at all, you'll have some. You understand? The man again lifted his head, and I took that as my cue to head back downstairs. Right back. I clambered down the ladder, nearly falling because I was moving so fast. I'd forgotten the candle in the attic, so I had to feel my way along the wall until I reached the stairs, which I proceeded down step by step. Every room seemed darker than the one before it, but I knew every L of that house so well I could have managed my way around it blind. And soon I was in the kitchen where the illuminated bottle light, nearly dead now, emitted a small halo. I pulled a clear glass jar from the cupboard. I sniffed it to make sure I hadn't put oil or any solvent in it. It smelled of dust and little else. I went over to the water barrel and submerged the jar until it was close to full, and then poured some of it out and took a swig. It was almost sweet. I thought I ought to put a touch of cider vinegar in it to purify it, but that might upset the man's stomach, so I would just chance it since I couldn't think of the last time I'd gotten sick from my own well water. Grabbing the illuminated bottle, I backtracked to the stairs and up the ladder. I found the man lying silently, his head turned to the side, his arms and legs snailing inwards to take up as little space as possible, as if he were long accustomed to sleeping in very tight quarters. I knelt over him to wake him up one final time. This time, his eyes slid open gradually and fixed mine. Almost done. I'm leaving you up here now so you can sleep. I'm setting this jar of water right here near the bowl so you can drink it if you need, and wash yourself too. I gotta take this candle, but when the sun rises, you'll get some light come through that window and you'll be able to see everything. I pointed to the shuttered dormer windows at each end of the attic, which were grimy with disuse, but not so opaque that light couldn't pass through them. If you need anything, you just bang on the floor, because I'm right below you. Don't cry out. Just knock on the floor like you did on my door. On the floor. If I don't respond, it means I ain't in the house or I'm busy, but I'll come eventually. You understand? The man blinked several times, and I took this for assent. Now get you some sleep. The man's mouth fell open in a kind of acknowledgement, and his eyes closed. I took the candle and illuminated bottle and headed toward the trapdoor opening. As I turned my body to descend the ladder, I heard a low buzzing, which I realized were words coming from the man's mouth finally, but they were so soft I couldn't make them out. I wondered if he was awake or talking in his sleep, and continued through the trapdoor, but the man's voice, still barely a whisper, rose as if to say, "Listen." I halted and turned around, climbing back into the room and over to the man whose eyes were still closed. His lips, however, were now moving. But although I stood right over him, I couldn't hear what he was saying because his voice had fallen so quickly, so I bent down, and because I still could not hear the man's voice, I brought my face close to the man's, my ear almost tasting his lips, so close that it brushed the chapped flesh, and I could almost hear what the man was saying, and he kept repeating the syllables so barely audible that I had to concentrate to make sure I heard them right, and it was just one word, a strange one. He kept repeating his name. Strangely, the word sounded familiar, or at least that was my initial thought. I had heard it somewhere, but couldn't remember where. After a while, the man's lips stopped moving. The mumbling, which was what it was, ceased, and I rose and tiptoed back to the trapdoor. The word, because it was the same one I was now sure issuing like a tattoo, had become light snores. As my feet, then hips, then torso, then throat passed down through the hole which I closed above me, I repeated to myself the word that the man had been trying to say, uttering with all that he had left, and I felt so tired I could barely form a thought myself, so I went to my room and dropped right into my bed, and as I did so, I could hear the word the name tumbling from my own lips, almost by reflex, before I closed my own eyes and fell asleep. Essequibo. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up, Pamela Schneed. Pamela is a poet, performer, and visual artist, an educator. She is the author of Funeral Diva, City Lights 2020. She teaches across disciplines in Columbia University's Visual Arts MFA program and is a guest faculty member in the Whitney ISP. She is the recipient of a Creative Capital Grant in Literature 2023 and a NISCA Grant in Literature 2024. She is the performer and writer of a music show, a tribute to Big Mama Thornton. She is a Tiger Mentor in the Arts at Cornell, Fall 2024. Help me welcome Pamela.
Good evening. I always love me some John Keane, and I love me some other countries. So you all know kind of what I've done, and I tried to document a lot of members of other country who passed to HIV, AIDS, and every time I come back here, I start to remember Rodney Brown. We were both friends with Don Reed. He wasn't a member of other countries, but we worked together at Hedrick Martin, and he was a visual artist. So anyway, it all comes flooding back, and I'm happy to be here. Tribute to Big Mama Thornton will be at Joe's Pub, February 28th. I'm singing the whole set, so you gotta come, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Yeah. And people were like astonished. They were like, wait, you know, I wrote it, I'm singing it. And I have a visual show at Dashwood Projects that's on right now, and it's called Speaking Tongue. And I want to say hi to Cat Chairs. And thank you, the Poetry Project. Thank you, Robert Penn, for inviting me. And here's something new. Contrary to what's been stated, and the white man from Shark Tank who tweeted after the election, "Congratulations, Mr. Trump, you've won the election fair and square." Contrary to all those in the left pointing fingers trying to place blame for the catastrophe, I have to interject and say, dear people, please, you must understand that this too was a stolen election. Should I say it again? This too was a stolen election. From the time before and after, an angry mob converged on the Capitol in January 2021, attempting to physically change the election results. From the time they defecated on the desk of Nancy Pelosi, smeared feces on the walls. Contrary to reports, people did die that day. An insurrection led by the former president, who describes it now as a day of love. This same man, a convicted felon who broke all rules, was allowed to run for office again, whereas if he had received the same treatment as P. Diddy Combs, he would never be heard from again. But even liberals, everyone supports and easily accepts the criminality and incarceration of black men. Besides the fact the Trump presidency was basically bought by a white billionaire who says he developed an app that could track election results before anyone else. And not to mention all the bad theater and the assassination attempts, the big band-aids on his and his followers' ears. Trump never followed protocol, never went to the hospital. We never heard from the family, from the shooter's family or anyone, all of which was a manipulation of the public. And if you read my newest book, You know, I go in on the film Queen and Slim by Lena Waithe. After the black fugitives shoot a cop, they go on the run, hiding, as they say, in plain sight. She wears a tiger-striped mini dress and high heels. He wears a velvet jogging suit. They drive in Uncle's Cadillac. It all seems so ludicrous, but it's basically the same strategy that Trump and his cronies used to steal the election. Allowed to say and do things any of us would be fired for or incarcerated, condemned. Using this strategy of hiding in plain sight, we even helped him. The media, the citizens, the law. The only antidote that I may have to Trump's election is in a small ferry to Robben Island, one that shuttles you to the former prison where those who fought against apartheid were held. The only answers may be in one wool blanket, a basin, toilet, cell, and the tiny windows of Robben Island, in the discarded artillery, the rock, and the limestone yard where many were blinded, driven mad. Now the survivors, former prisoners, give tours, their faces carved like tree roots exposed. The only answers may be in the surrounding peaks of Table Mountain, its 12 apostles, all now standing as a testament through struggles, through years, what can be defeated, what can be overcome. Described as an honor killing in Iraq, a heterosexual man traveled from abroad and killed his sister, a transgender woman. Police knew she was in danger. Instead of protection, told her to hide, move far away. Friends said she was full of light, wouldn't hurt a soul, was a hairdresser. The perpetrator, her brother, was not arrested, fled by car to a neighboring country. In the same country, another woman weeps, saying that her husband and son have murdered the transgender child she birthed in an honor killing. All over the world, there are burns and scars of women disfigured beyond recognition by some flimsily constructed porous excuse called protecting the family honor. I want to, but can't separate what occurred at the Academy Awards in the United States. A black man slaps another, claiming to have dishonored another's wife. At the end of that argument, I see violence and death, male egos. If this were medieval times, perhaps a duel was in order. But in 2024, all I can do is cry, question. My friend says the slap was indicative of our moment, almost maybe not near post-pandemic, an upside-down world caused by sickness and death, endless quarantines, inflation, senseless violence abounds. I won't even mention my music teacher, murdered in an act that I will never be able to make sense of. Heart hardens. I keep going, afraid to stop. This is my story about being a prop in a story. And this is a follow-up to my piece about being trapped in a story, my story, or the one that's told about me. I imagine myself as a mime scaling the walls of my story, shouting, "Help!" But then I realized mimes can't speak. So I would have to have a sign that says, to say, "Help, I'm trapped in a story." So this is my follow-up. Now, I imagine myself as a table in a theater or a drama, and someone who can actually see me walks by and asks, "What are you doing?" And I say, "Shh." I'm a prop in a story, which is a very important central role. Literally, my presence holds up the whole thing. The scene depends on me, my participation in some way. And every once in a while, I'll get a kick or an acknowledgement, but I'm mostly there to make sure that the scene succeeds. I'm supposed to be invisible, an anchor with no speaking part, an inanimate object who can't speak, por ejemplo. There is this lesbian that everybody knows, and I don't see her very often, but every time I do, there's hatred in her eyes, and she stares at me, and she snaps, "How are you?" And she keeps crossing in front of me, wanting me to see her, and gets angrier and angrier, and all of her friends snub me too, and I barely know her. Years ago, she tried to lure me into her hotel room suggestively, and then tried to dismiss me. So I see that I'm a very big prop in her story. I heard she says very bad things about me. In her eyes, I see a road and a journey like we've traveled together a long distance, but I barely ever talked to her. But as props go, the scene couldn't go on without me. And then there's this woman I went out with 30 years ago whom I don't talk to, and every time I see her, her lover holds her close as if I'm a monster. And I'm like, it was 30 years ago, you know, and it takes two. But the story that I'm a star of, without a speaking part, has traveled and grown wings and branches, and it gets bigger and bigger each year, yet she was never there for me, and nobody cared about that. It's like that movie Bowfinger, where an actor is secretly filmed wherever he goes. He becomes the star of a film he hasn't consented to. And then there's this one drama where I was really a prop, and one person who kept coming on to me, and every time I saw their lover, they'd say, "We're in love." And I was like, okay, good luck. Though it hurts because I thought they had feelings for me, and then the other person they loved, a third wheel, keeps coming up to me randomly and sneering as if I tried to break the couple up, and I've barely said 2 words to any of them. But I see I'm the central figure or prop that gets leaned on, used, discarded, constantly rejected by people I'm not even going out with. The surprising thing is they all call themselves lovers, followers of poetry's truth and light. They shout Black Lives Matter and feminist doctrine. You'll see them at protests against rape wearing shirts, carrying banners that say, "Believe women." Getting some testimony up in here. To be clear, Beyonce's new country album is my favorite of all of her music. The others I could barely listen. She always struck me as someone wealthy enough to try on any identity she pleased. For me, she's more orchestrated than authentic. Like if she and Jay-Z were supposed to be so revolutionary or pro-black, why did Jay-Z diss Colin Kaepernick, who stood up to the NFL on racism and police brutality? And why did Beyonce sing and sample Tina Turner's famous abuse by Ike? Questions aside, in Cowboy Carter, I can hear the black roots of country music, the banjo, the imagery. A few songs remind me, too, of Big Mama Thornton's music. I still don't think that I can join the Beehive, but what fascinates me is how her marketing mobilizes us youth and adults to buy $1,000 tickets, invest in the opera of whether or not she's allowed in country music, how many Grammys she's got, why she still hasn't won Album of the Year, whether or not Jay-Z cheated on her, etc., treating her as if she's some civil rights diva, and the internet has her name and music on rotation like every 3 seconds, and we out here fighting for Beyonce. While every other second, Israel bombs Gaza, hospital homes gutted, women, children, men decapitated, dismembered, starved, so many atrocities, I turn away sickened, out here fighting for Beyonce. Well, I know if we were mobilized against war instead of to buy stuff and sleep, this world could change. You can clap or something. Yeah, come on, give me some energy out here. Yeah, go read. The number of people who died as a result of the Capitol rioters on January 6th was downplayed. Official counts say anywhere from 7 to 10, those who died by suicide, suffered strokes, were crushed by a stampede, smashed over the head with a fire extinguisher, not counting the, say, 150 police officers traumatized after encounters with the mob, or the hundreds of thousands of Black Americans who watched the two Americas in effect, separate laws, justice systems for each color. They downplayed the role Trump played, that instigated and organized, responsible for terrorism and treason, and an accessory to murder. They downplayed the role Clarence's Thomas wife Ginny played, funding the rioters to and from Washington with the intent of overthrowing an election. They downplayed members of the Senate who aided the rioters, opened doors, Today, they arrested the black man who was a subway shooter, opened fire in a crowded subway car, his black face in full view, and he will pay. He will pay for every black man who ever shot up a place, people sped away, burglarized, molested, went batshit ballistic. In class today, maybe unrelated, but with a student not far from where they arrested the subway shooter, the white student asked in a presentation about love and protest, why do black people burn down their own neighborhoods during protest? I hinted that it may be the wrong question instead of asking, why have white people created a world so pathological, so violent, that we are left with little choices? Why does the media always demean black protests, but why don't white people get together with other white people and demand answers to questions about their own behavior? In the end, I said perhaps it wasn't his question to ask. Thanks. Now I gotta read two more. As little as I tried, I could not bring myself to watch When They See Us, about the Central Park Five, or Surviving R. Kelly. Too many scenes of subjection. So flipping through the streaming services, I settled on a good old-fashioned rom-com called Twilight, between a vampire and a young white woman named Bella. They're teenagers, and it's kind of cool, and the music is totally early 90s London The Cure, and their romance goes on for about 5 movies without breaking up, so that's a feat. And it all works if you suspend belief. I enjoyed it until the race consciousness part of me crept in, asking, why are these two guys going on about this pouty white girl for 5 movies? And the Native American werewolf guy just kind of tags along. I mean, Kristen Stewart is cool, and she's a butch dyke in real life. But why would these men fight over this white woman for eternity? I think things too, like if you're a vampire, you can get away with stuff, like having no boundaries because Edward pops into Bella's room at every hour of the night, which would be stalking. My race consciousness interjects itself into every scene I watch. Por ejemplo, I watched A Star is Born, and for the first 10 minutes, I was incredulous, and all I thought of was the Black Panther breakthrough, followed up by a box office dominated by a movie about 2 white straight people in love. In the era of unspeakable violence against women, girls, trans people, and people of color, we are made to watch and value 2 white people in love. Imagine at the height of apartheid in South Africa, Mandela jailed, Biko murdered, and the box office offers white romantic fantasies while people are fighting for their lives. I was just incredulous, but then it picked up, so I decided to stay. But I was really offended during Black History Month when they decided to re-release Black Panther in movie theaters free so that all black kids could see it. I mean, imagine if the whole of white history were shoved or compacted into 1 month, not the entire year as it exists now, and they decided to re-release Toy Story as a celebration of white culture. Give me a break. All films are race films, like it or not. Like, I rewatched Black Panther innocently, and I kind of enjoyed myself, but the message is the FBI, or what, your brother, not the FBI, is your enemy, and it gives little context of white oppression. It's like discussing the Rwandan massacre, excluding the role that Belgium played in the tribal warfare. And anyway, I watched the film Infinity Wars, a superhero farce. The white boys go to battle it out in Wakanda, which is a and I was kind of excited to see all the black characters again, and I'm also told in Endgame, all of Wakanda is wiped out. But I was watching a fight scene, and supposed to have mega resources like vibranium and technology, but I had to blink my eyes twice because during battle, wait a minute, is that a spear? I leaned in close, and the black people were using spears and were using technology to fight. Go figure. And then I watched Skull Island, curious about how they'd handle King Kong, and then even more curious, Africa, surrounded by this King Kong was god of a Polynesian island. And Samuel Jackson face off in what could be called a black-on-black crime. They marry each other, their nostrils fly to protect their own. White responsibility and for just one more thing, can we talk about Ben Affleck? No diss, because we're all human after all, but I need to know why Hollywood continues to put money behind him. All of his movies have flopped. They say Jiggly, made with Jennifer Garner, was down, lost $98 million. Still, they made Ben a superhero Batman, everything tanked, but it goes to show you how much money goes into Hollywood myth-making. A heterosexual white man, Cary Grant, Burt Reynolds, all the money $98 million could feed. Forest fires put out, animals alive, saved, and free. Thanks. And I'm going to close with one. See what we can do here. If one is fortunate, and I can't speak for everyone, they receive a gift, a talent, a lever to pull in cases of emergency, like the black box found in planes with instructions on how to survive. Someone that serves as a preserver, a raft in floodwaters. As many of you know, my lifeline has always been poetry. From the time that I was 8 years old and I heard an infomercial for poetry by Maya Angelou in Still I Rise, it opened up the window what is possible to disparage anything some do because she saved me. I always wanted to write a children's story about a hero called poetry that on the side, I often wonder about America's fascination with superheroes. Perhaps it's an alter ego, Jekyll and Hyde, that a country commits atrocities and superheroes, a sign that it never by Black Panther to re-release during Black children could. Imagine if white history was shown once a year. How would they feel if the movie about them was The Incredibles? Anyway, it was education that led me out of the suburbs and sure fate for black girls and women. Eastern University, Williams, and there again I discovered through the African American Institute poetry and theater. Still, it was writing and theater that led me to the New School, that led me to my first writing class with Jane Lazar, and when I wrote about a girl, a black girl that caused nothing but shame and pain, a black girl so ugly that her own mother would not accept her, cursed from birth until death, left to wage her own war on the world that cursed her. She knew that it was me. She wrote at the bottom of my papers, "Yours is the best poetry and writing I've read in all my years of teaching." Her words gave me for the first time, gave me a sense of worth and purpose. And after I'd gotten heavily into drugs, one morning in a Lower East Side tenement, strung out, I decided to jump from the roof and kill myself. The only thing that I could think to live for was poetry. And I'm saying all of this now. I've taken the long and scenic route to tell you it was me, not a craft, that became my mother's hero. I was a champion from the early age of 9 during my father's beatings when she would instruct me to call the police. Then later over the holidays when he gave her nothing, I stole from department stores to give her presents, and she would taunt my father saying, "My daughter will give me presents." I went there and sometimes stood between my father and she during their arguments. It was her words, "Get an education," that led me out of the suburbs into higher education. I was able to escape her fate. I'm writing this now to say, despite all of my valiant efforts, I can. One of these years, even though high femme, I always had a sense of bravado that I could save anyone. It showed up in my teaching with students. Anyone in a dark place, I would show up in my raft and I would toss them a preserver. Only now, the enemy is death. I see my mother descending, and I cannot pry open the jaws. A fate where not even poetry can intervene.
What can I say? Pamela. Danya R. Love is, Danya R. Love is Black, queer, living with HIV and thriving. They're the founding executive director of Write It Out, a playwrights program, prize, and retreat for people living with HIV. They've graced the cover of Pause Magazine's Pause 100 issue, A&U Magazine, and Positively Aware. They're among the Plus Magazine's most amazing people living with HIV. As an artist, they're the recipient of Pause's Best in Performing Arts Award, the Horton Foote Playwriting Award, the Terrence McNally Award, the Antonio Inaugural Langston Hughes Award, and the Princess Grace Playwriting, to name a few. Select Play 1 and 2, a semi-play that explores years of love living with HIV. It was a New York Times happened to all, a work that explores how HIV and AIDS have impacted a Black family in the inner city and rural South. And I got a chance to see that, and it was co-founder of the Each Other Project, a digital that celebrates through art and activism for Black, queer, and trans communities. Danya R. Love.
Evening, good people. Hey, it's so good to be here in the whole space with each and every single one of you. I want to start by sharing an ancestor into the space. I want to bring Joseph Beam into the space because I remember in the life, a Black Gay Anthology, in the introduction, he talks about visibility as survival. And I just think about my journey of living with HIV, my journey of being a queer person, a Black queer person. I was able to, because of other individuals who I saw who looked like me, who loved like me. And I also think about how community is survival. I've been able to exist and I've been able to survive because of community as well, and how important community is, how important visibility is to those of us who exist on the margins. And I share all this because when I think about my work, particularly the excerpt that you're going to be experiencing from What Will Happen to All That Beauty, it holds space for visibility. It holds space for community. And I do not call the work a play, I call it an offering. I call it an offering because what I'm trying to do with the work is offer community and visibility and softness and grace and representation and love to a group of people, Black people living with HIV, who have historically been erased from the narratives. It is such an honor right now to be here with other countries and to hold space in this way. I remember when we were doing the production of What Will Happen, I had a library. The library consisted of literature that was created for and by Black people, Black queer people living with HIV. And other countries was a part of that library. So to be here right now is so beautiful and is not lost on me at all. And the excerpt that you're going to be experiencing from What Will Happen to All That Beauty is an excerpt in which one of the main characters has just learned of their AIDS diagnosis. And we experience what that moment is for this character and how community shows up in this moment as well. I'm just thinking about the importance of work like this, of what I try to do with my artistry and with my work. What always comes to mind is Angels in America, is the Normal Heart, and the band plays on. And we can go on and on and on and on. And yes, there are things like inadequate health care. Yes, there are things like redlining, right? There are so many things that go into Black people in particular having higher numbers. But what also is a factor is the lack of representation. And my work tries to represent communities that have often been erased from the narrative historically and intentionally. So I will now zip my lips and host amazing actors Jude Thibault and Dante Jean Felix space from What Will Happen to All That Beauty. Thank you so much.
Excuse me, something? Brother.
A phone number?
Yes.
Is this your number?
Yes.
Why would I want your number?
Well, why wouldn't you?
Excuse me?
Please, I know how that sounds. Excuse me.
And would you excuse me?
Wait, please.
So you're just sitting in the waiting room of a doctor's office?
Yes.
Why?
For you.
I really do have to go.
I just want to talk to you very quickly. A brother. I'm Abdul. I sit here.
People like me.
Yes. I see a lot of men come out that room. They always have. Not us. Most times we're normally alone, so I sit and I wait for my brothers to come out that room so I could be here if y'all need me.
I don't.
The way you're running out that room, almost knocking over the magazine rack, and the puffiness of your eyes say different. Oh, and just put something frozen on your eyes to help with the puffiness. I prefer unthawed chicken. You'll probably have to do that for the next 2 months. Your tears. From experience. I found out earlier this year, January, and it wasn't until about March or April that I stopped having to put frozen chicken breasts on my eyes. So I understand.
I have to tell my wife.
say just rip the Band-Aid off. Right after tell you have AIDS. That's the best way to do it, trust me.
It's not just me though. She sleeps with women too. We understanding that way.
Boom! That's one thing down. Congrats. Seriously, that makes what you're about to tell her a little easier, I promise you.
She's pregnant.
All the more reason to hurry up and tell her. God, even now.
Now, I wouldn't be here in this situation, and honestly, my brother, I don't need God with me.
The Quran says...
The way I don't want to hear anything about God is the same way I don't want to hear anything about... No offense.
I'm taken. You know you're really cute when you get offended. No offense.
If you'd excuse me.
There's a group that started this year. Gay Men of African Descent, founded by Reverend Charles Angel. May he rest. Sit here, and I see so many of us come in and leave this office alone. Thanks to Reverend Angel, Gay Men of African Descent is a place where you don't have to be alone, especially going through what you're about to go through. You'll need community, family. We meet Friday evenings, and I make a mean fried chicken. And don't worry, I always clean it after using it on my puffy eyes.
Thank you.
May Allah, my brother.
JR. I'm JR.
15th, 1986, 11:05 a.m. I met a beautiful man named JR.
What are you doing?
I like to write things down.
Oh.
Nice to meet you, JR.
Nice to meet you, Abdul.
If you ever need me or want to come, give that number a call.
End of scene.
I'd like to open up the floor. And I'd like to call up one of our own, E. Penn.
Oops, this is a little high for me. Good to see you. Out to support and participate. They told us open mic readers to just stick to 4 to 6 minutes, so I rehearsed. And I'm writing a novel now that's about two approximately 30-year-old Black queer men who meet in 1979, fall in love, and the story continues through 1992. So this is from chapter 15, and it's already early 1982, sorry. So they've known each other for 2 years now. They're living together, and they've started renovating a building together. They got a fixer-upper that they're fixing up. So here it goes. The Sunday before Rick started his new job, he and Donnie explored their new neighborhood. They had often talked about doing so, but never found the time. Old brownstones with high stoops faced the north and south sides of Tompkins Square Park, but a mix of old tenements and run-down apartment buildings lined Avenues A to the west and B to the east. At first glance, the area was empty. On closer inspection, they spotted signs of resurgence and other pioneers taking up residence. Rick and Donnie wandered south on Avenue B, where numerous building shells stood shakily like ghosts of an animated past. A past in which working-class immigrants ate, slept, and shared times with loved ones after a long day, where honest people seeking a better life once raised families and prospered relative to their previous pasts. Hippies and squatters languished on hydrants and stairs. Many were scrawny, unkempt, and disoriented. Muffled sounds of sledgehammering and sawing emanated from inside a building with no window panes. Donnie assumed someone was renovating and shared the assessment with Rick, who marveled at the bravery and confidence needed to undertake a major project in a residential desert more imposing than the other side of Tompkins Square, their side. Only 1 block away from their property, this avenue existed in a world apart. Strangers stumbled about, unable to lift their legs high enough to avoid tripping on the numerous cracks and contours of the sidewalk. Fat, brown rats leisurely watched from the safety of sublevels and gutters, waiting for scraps. The sights were worse than either expected, and they were ready to go home. They decided to cross the derelict park. Day. Caressed, proud. 2 steps, a shrill cry sliced the atmosphere. The voice pulled their eyes in its direction. Several grown men shouted anti-gay slurs while attacking a tall, graceful black woman with a deep voice. She admonished them, advised them, fought back, landing a hard right. Its nose. That they called the police, and that the police wouldn't arrive soon enough if they patrolled. Options, Rick asking for some dope, charged toward the homophobes. Nowhere, and colors arrived from the stoops and park benches and chased off the thugs. Donnie recognized some of them from among the people whose paths he crossed on his way to work. Woman to offer their assistance. Someone closer helped her. She straightened her, stirred off her retreat, and opened it, while the men who chased away suggested she sit down. And all satisfied with her appearance, men surrounded her knights in shining armor for their help, then announced that she had to go back to her flat again. In a parting gesture of gratitude, she perused the men again. When her eyes landed on Rick, she broke character for less than a blink, allowing recognition to flutter across her face. "Christopher?" Rick blurted, astonished and frozen where he stood. "Not today, Roderick," Christopher answered before turning on her now broken heel and walking away, accompanied by several of her knights. "You know her?" Donnie asked. "You didn't tell me you're into drag." "I'm not," Rick answered. "I mean, I don't know if I like drag or not, but I'm certain that was my college classmate, Christopher." "She's foxy," Donnie joked, then rested his hand on Rick's shoulder. Still shell-shocked, Rick concurrently nodded and shook his head, then said, "I need to go home and sit down." Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I'd like to call Robert Vasquez Pacheco.
Bronx Latino, okay? New Yorican. Afro Latino, which is a concept I'm still pushing, that people are understanding. But we were slaves. We didn't pick cotton. Cane. They gave us machetes and we chopped down trees, okay? So we know that story. I have an option today. To poetry readings the way I pack. I want to bring everything. No, with one. So I brought two. One poems, one's up, and the other is about sex, COVID. Which ones do you want to hear? We'll start with the love. The first time I read at other countries, I read, it was, the nice thing was I read just before, and he said, that was beautiful. And I went, oh God, thank you. The first one is called Break Up, Break Down. You must leave. I do understand. All burns must heal. I never meant to, no matter now. The stars fall down, and you must leave. Never shared moonlit skies, never broke night by the sea. No matter now. I'll feed my regrets alone. Could have, should have, didn't. The stars fall down, and you must leave. Without your light, my shadows rise. No matter now, I do understand. The stars fall down. Yes, I am scared, and you must leave. Thank you. Now something a little lighter. This is for William. All days I've had visions of you, snapshots of moments we've shared. Your mouth as you come close to kiss me. Your smile as you push me back onto the bed. Your voice as you moan or talk or laugh or sing. The forest of chest hair I wander through. The curve of your neck when I bury my face there. The lightening of your touch on my skin. The clarity of your eyes where I lose myself every time. I won't mention, we keep saying, this is crazy, but we can't stop smiling. We hold each other so tightly, never let me go. I will hold you forever if you let me. But more than anything else, every day I see this space in my heart. It's shaped like you. It's all yours. And finally, this is called April Night. Spring night in that year that many of us are so desperate to forget. I was wandering home after an evening's unwise yet light nation through that horrible time. Trees rustling in conversation, crickets gossiping unseen on Myrtle Avenue, a ghost silent and empty except for the too frequent shriek of sirens. Serenity. The warm spring air touched my face, as soft as his kiss. Looking up into that star-filled sky, city dwellers never see. It's so indifferent to our drama. Alone on the empty street, breathing in the silence. This was spring. This was my favorite season. And I was alive, and for that moment, I was.
Thank you. Next up, I'd like to call Tangi Mitchell. Thank you.
Everybody. I wasn't aware that there was for one sign up, so I was like, sure. So excuse me reading off of my phone for that reason. I'm always thinking about migration of all sorts, and this is a poem sort of circling that concept in different ways. It's called In Defense of Roaming, after Arthur Jaffa with a line from Evie Shockley. The distance between life and death is often a matter of migration. Migration, a matter of community, of who is there to hold you once the train rolls in. I took lovers in Chicago, in Brooklyn, in Philly. They came from Tennessee, Georgia, Louisiana. We were clusters from a wild bush, flailing on the wind, but still skin to skin. More than once, I've been devoured on the top bunk of a hostel bed in the unnamed country of my mind, seen escape smolder in a fugitive's eyes and grown heavy-lidded. Twice, I've heard the hydrangeas scream from their soil cells and, recognizing the plea, yanked them free. Just down the dirt road from my libido, two girls giggle and steal kisses behind a church pew. A few years up the street, I hang oiled and nude in a New York apartment, caressing the dent on a bed as if my man is still there. The artist, anonymous but thorough, dark painted nipples winking above a velvet duvet. I imagine a black movement so stuttered it eludes mapping. Bodies traceless, tied only to the other for the length of good sense. Darling, I'm in your city next. When my ship docks at 7, meet me at the port with soft hands full of wild and free flowers. I don't know where I'm going, but I need a ride. Thank you. And I'll just share one more poem. I'm also sort of thinking through, I'm from North Carolina, first generation, rest of my family's also thinking about genealogy and different kind of trying to find light in dark, sort of lack of record, right? A lack to create a, there isn't any sort of informs my genealogy practice. And so here, grandma sort of have a conversation, and it's called Leake County, Mississippi, 1892, and Italic, 1965. There's an epigraph from Nikki Finney, the great everything. Okay. Like dust meddled up by Monday night, crescent smirk, lipped, worried marriage of salt water and shore between two slate stenciled brows. I am the unwrinkled jaw, the squirrel meat, ink tossed a boy's way by clear, amber-tinged eyes. My mother was a feral horse caught from her flat land of fractal pastures. Ginger gilt on scorched afro, globular knees made strong by crouching in sun-baked soil. Daughter of my daughter's daughter, take off your woolly shirt. The sun tattoos my truth on your spine. M-A-N-D-Y. Stardust letters gathered like constellations, as if you conjured me, as if I birthed you myself. Helen. I rose to calls for bended work, children curved close to earth as if in spring. Frenetic groan of labor song, land of yanked bloom and nut's edge. And gather what my hands can hold. Call me beanpole, slim, funny-eyed, like in dirt at midday's break, boast God's word to my motley flock. Like you, at 6, I watched a lamb white and aglow trot under Ma's bed and never come out. 2 rows over, who door and ask for my youth. I'll not woo in service of our gold-flecked image. Mother, let these arms be the last scabbed by sunlight. Let pasture rest. In the midden, your hands on my wrists, busied by what pays, by what loves.
Wow. What would we do without our cell phones? Next, I'd like to call up David Moore.
Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Oh, okay. Happy holidays. This is like the second time I did a reading with other countries. I think it was the summer solstice. So it's like very different now, weather-wise, that's for sure. So I'm going to read an incredibly short story. It's from a collection that I've been working on for a very long time, about maybe 20 years or so. And it's basically a collection of short stories that involve kind of black men throughout history and around the world, and there's different kind of ways that they kind of intersect, which I won't go into. This is the last one in the collection. It's very short. It's called Untitled, or Lick the Sky. It's dedicated to my mother. And it's inspired by, even though it's set, this short story is set in Brazil, it's actually inspired by something happened with my own mother and myself when I was very young, like a little toddler. So Untitled, or Lick the Sky. They continued their hike up the grassy side of the dark, bushy, and her son gradually came into full view of. Deciding that this was as good a place as any for them to stop, had her striped greenery, and they settled onto it. Looking out over the bayou, her 4-year-old boy sipped the coconut drink. Tasty enough to. Several tiny sailboats down there in the bay meandered about. The sun lay back. The assortment of white cottony clouds above. The mother pointed them out. The sun silently stared straight up at the sky, flashing some of it onto the blanket. With a bright orange bandana to the spot. She lay down again, her back once more against the striped fabric. The two of them sighed for a while, finally pointing upward again at one of the clouds in particular. Giraffe, she said. Studied the cloud closely, then gasped. Giraffe, he smiled, totally amazed by his mother's powers. She pointed at another, bus, bus, he echoed. Then finding his own cloud, piggy. The mother smiled, then pointed again, dog. The son pointed at yet another, tree, aeroplane, flower, trolley, Superman, snake, chickie, bread, banana, spider, monkey, the son giggled. House, mouse, hat, fishy, mango, horsey, wheel, coconut, car, pa. Thirsty, the son leaned forward onto his elbow to take another sip from his coconut drink. Looking down into his cup, he saw a yellow and black bee swimming in the juice, fluttering its wings, kicking its tiny legs. The son frowned, showing the floater to his mother. She frowned as well, then exchanged her own drink with that of her son's. This juice had no bees. The son smiled at her as he sipped. She rubbed his rough head lightly before stretching back out. The two of them lying there, because we're from the same town, and it was a McDonald's that we were eating.
Thank you. We're a little short on time, so please try to keep your readings to about 4 minutes. Next up is Jeffrey Haskins. Thank you, a veteran of other countries.
Well, I bring you Philadelphia. Yeah. I got lost. You know, the parts in New York that, as a Columbia graduate from the drama department, theater, and as managing director of Repertory Theater. And the plays that we did for a couple years. So I'm going to keep it really short because Pam Sneed was in one of our plays. And Pigeons. And so ancestry today, and I want to call out some names. And I'm going to be brief, Lynn, but I need to do it. And when I stand here, and I think, yeah. And I think of Colin Robinson with the First Other Countries anthology, and I was able to read what was going in the book. And so I think about Donald Woods and us working at Brooklyn Children's Museum. And I think about who this poem was the first one I was published in 100 Black Gay Poets. And I thought about how we fought over this piece. And that was Eve, Asado Saint. And he came to haunt me in Philadelphia as Theater X did a recent production of his plays in Philadelphia. And I was like, I didn't know y'all straight people were gonna do some gay theater. Y'all didn't ask me, but that's okay. And so this was published, and it's called Gossip, for the boys who talk a little too much. Lost in idle chatter, unsung truths spoken from bitter lips, make-believe stories told in disloyalty and betrayal, cutting a reputation into smitten pieces of debris, devaluing a human being a hell of a lot less than their worth, belittling a soul that was floating high because of an infelt malicious jealousy, creating lies interesting empty spaces of reality, making them the more so everyone who hears will believe your side of the story. No shame or guilt. Carry out your well-planned character assassination as you gossip. Short and sweet, to the point. Cut you, you don't know you bleeding. So, an honor, and one of the things, and one of the things about the last time I performed, and the man was there, and his name was Craig G. Harris, and his last performance with our dance company was to do the reading of Caretakers. And so I will try to invoke the spirit in that Caretakers. We call the women the caretakers. Honor them one day in May or the month of March if we think ourselves truly progressive, not chauvinistic, or that we do care about the women. We care about the women because they are humane and loving and specially there. Evelyn was there preparing for a gala around the telltale signs of chemotherapy. Evelyn would have gone to work today if her man had not broke her right hand with the empty gin bottle. So she dialed with her left one to say somebody else will have to type today. Charlene got hip to the fact that a woman was stealing her money just to fill her pipe with crack. Take care. Asesu Yemanye. Take care, Nam Yaho Renge Kie. Take care because Mama may have, Papa may have, but take care because you are the caretakers. But who will take care of the women when there is no way that they will allow them? And I'm going to ask something, Craig, don't hit me. When they will not allow them to be president of the United States. Take care. But women will learn that they can do no more or less than take care of themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for that tribute to so many of our ancestors. Next, I'd like to call up John Martin Green.
Hello, John Martin.
Hello, family. Hi. Hi. It's so cold, I don't know if I can read. Let me see. This piece is an excerpt from an essay that I wrote in the summer of 2020, a few months into the pandemic, reflecting on my sense that African Americans are masters of script flipping with respect to identity, our identities. Okay. In the spring of 2020, the ghastly lynching of George Floyd triggered a global eruption of humanity, responding to the fact that Black lives don't matter. While it is clear that the framers and organizers of the Black Lives Matter movement are due an incalculable debt of gratitude from America and the world for their strategic organizing savvy and persistence in getting millions of people across the globe behind the Black Lives Matter rallying cry. That said, and not to diminish or downplay the impact of this latest phase of African Americans' movement for human rights, perhaps it is time we consider the possibility that we are due yet another reimagining of ourselves in celebration of the new reality we're attempting to forge. Because the fact is, we who fancy ourselves enlightened say we recognize that race is not real, but rather a social construct, may then fail to recognize that when we identify as Black, that race becomes real. Where race is a set of human categories, when we define ourselves as Black, thereby categorizing our human beingness as Black, race changes from an abstraction, from an arbitrary and artificial social construct, to a fact of our existence by our very confirmation. Where one's identity is their reality, African Americans, and for that matter, all African-descended peoples identifying as Black, makes Black our collective identity. That is, the reality for African-descended people and everyone facing us. In the wake of Malcolm X's assassination and the advent of the Black Power, Black consciousness, and Black arts movement some 60 years ago, when in an effort to cast off the negative meanings of the word Black, which most had deemed a vile epithet up to that point, we set about reclaiming and repurposing it as a term of empowerment. What we may have failed to recognize is that the myriad negative connotations of the appellation may have made it an intractable and otherwise irrevocably destructive moniker. So, while Black identification initially served as a powerful galvanizing force in the direction of what we intended as self-determination, its utility along these lines has long since ebbed and faded. Truth be told, the illusion was always an illusion, signifying evil, utter hopelessness, total darkness, and disaster, among other abnegations. Black is both the primordial and the motherlode of stigmatized identities. Lest we forget, the term Black as the identification of a people began with the codification of the term in laws circumscribing our humanity and establishing the identity white as sovereign over people so deemed during the period of Africans' enslavement. In hindsight, our eventual adoption of Black as our collective identity was likely inevitable as the culmination of the process of hegemony, the outcome of a dominant group's creating a consensus by convincing or coercing others to accept their language, norms, and usage as standard or paradigmatic. As it happens, Black lives can't matter because all our protestations to the contrary notwithstanding, over many, many generations, Black has been hot-wired into the collective consciousness as bad and as wrong, and must therefore be vanquished, cast out, done away with, and triumphed over. The slogan, Black is beautiful, coined in 1968, 105 years after emancipation, as a self-determining rebranding campaign in conjunction with a movement for Black power, was a well-meaning but Sisyphean task. The problem was, is, and ultimately will always be, to the extent that language shapes our beliefs, worldviews, and constitutes the basis of our cognitive framing of experience, on a purely linguistic level, as Black is defined as disastrous, full of anger or hate, and hopeless, the construct Black power was oxymoronic. And seeing as Black is the color of death, perhaps we should not be surprised that the powers that be have normalized our demise. Indeed, in the face of the gun violence by which our sons decimate each other with ever-increasing frequency, we too might seem to have normalized our demise. Fortunately, African Americans have forged a long tradition of observing varied options for identifying ourselves. Since the advent of our enslavement, we began teaching the world how to wage movements for self-determination, regularly eschewing ensuing diminutions of our humanity from abolition and manumission to desegregation and civil rights, Black power and Black consciousness, prison abolition and Black Lives Matter. All the movements we have waged for our liberation have involved identity, an unending process of redefining ourselves in response to definitions that had been imposed on us. In this manner, we shifted from being dubbed niggers to adopting the term colored, then Negro, then Afro-American, then Black, and the aforementioned African-American. As a people, if we will be truly self-determining, the goal of repurposing instruments of our dehumanization like Black and nigger as terms of empowerment, if not a fool's errand, is certainly close to it. Black may well be the single most negatively loaded term in the whole of the English lexicon. Ever so few and far between are the notions encapsulated in it that are other than awful. So, rather than continuing to attempt to make Black mean good and powerful and beautiful, why not recognize all these attributes of which we are so richly endowed with identifications that are congruent with these properties?
And finally, I call up Amma Birch.
I never met an open mic I didn't like. I'm really, I was thinking about going to church as a child, and I went to Emmanuel Baptist Church when I was a child, and there was an organist at the church, and he was a young Black man, and he would play every Sunday, and he ran the children's choir, and he started to lose weight one year, and we watched him kind of fade away and die, and he had AIDS. And that was really the first time in my life that I knew I was gay, because I didn't understand how someone so wonderful could have something so horrible happen to them because of who they loved. Yesterday, I was counting caterpillars with pun. We were reciting lines, boys don't cry. Are you a boy or a girl? Do caterpillars ever get asked such questions? Pun was interested in death and burial in New Orleans. I tried to explain it to her. Language can be so futile. The barrier between knowing and not knowing. Don't all butterflies look the same, yet male monarchs have spots? Do butterflies have second-line funerals? A parade of butterflies carrying their ancestors' spirits home as they travel from south to north. I wrote Eileen today. They are in Greece. I ask them if they have been to Lafcadia. I wonder if there is a marker on the spot that Sappho jumped from. I'm sure you've all heard about Steve Cannon by now.
My friends, we have arrived at the end of our program, and I think there are some thank yous that are in order. I'd like to thank all the presenters and all the open mics. Yes. I'd also like to thank the former program director who gave us the date before changing jobs, Laura Henriksen. The current program director, Miren Arsanios. Poetry Project's Communications Director, Will Farris. Poetry Project's Interim Executive Director, Nicole Wallace. Not here today, but Sir Rodney Sir for introducing Other Countries Collective to Laura Henriksen and always promoting Other Countries outreach at book festivals with hospitality. Robert Penn for tirelessly organizing this and so many other countries' events. For Kevin Magruder for keeping all of the magic and wonder of Other Countries in focus and on point. Maybe you would like to say something, Kevin?
I just want to thank you all for coming. And this is an example of the community that Danye was speaking about. That's really why Other Countries has continued. We'll be celebrating our 40th anniversary in a couple of years. And we are a writing workshop. We meet the second and fourth Saturday of the month virtually, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. But what made it a community was when we were meeting face to face, we would go out to dinner afterwards, and that poem you read about gossip kind of brought back those dinners. But very early on, we also began to publish, and we have 3 anthologies. They're on the table, they're there for sale. And Black Gay Voices that came out in 1988, Sojourner, Black Gay Voices in the Age of AIDS, 1993, and then Voices Rising came out in 2007. And we're continuing to think about other ways that we can do things. We're going to be planning some things in 2025 that we'll be sharing that with you. The next event that we have is Saturday, January 18th. And we'll be presenting Brad Walren. He will be reading from his book of poetry and discussing it. It's called Everywhere Alien, and there's flyers on the table over there. It's a virtual program, Saturday, January 18th, 2 p.m. to 3:30, and you're welcome to join us. We began doing that last year in the Saturdays between some of the workshops. We've been presenting authors of new work and allowing them to have a time to both read, but then we discuss kind of the craft of kind of how they came to do what they're doing. And so, again, we appreciate you being here this evening. Stop by, look at the books. They're also for sale online, and we have a flyer for that too then. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Finally, my gentle and cold friends, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Other Countries Workshop, which meets virtually now via Zoom. Some nearly 40 years ago, we started with a workshop that is still going strong now. If you are a Black queer man or know someone who is also interested in reading and or writing, please scan the QR code on the table to our Facebook page, where you can find info on our history and our twice-monthly meetings. It has been a pleasure to be with you all. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you. Good night.